The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making the wise simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. Commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. They are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. By them your servant is warned, and keeping them there is a great reward.
Good morning. It was about 20 years ago. I got a call from my dad. He was in Arizona, I was in Texas, and he said, "Hey, we have a Pagankoff family reunion. It's going to take place up in Kansas. I'd like for you to go with me." The thought of a Pagankoff family reunion was roughly akin to the thought of a root canal without Novocaine. Like, this is the last thing I want to do, is sit around with a bunch of old people that I've never met, never knew, reminiscing. But you know, I didn't get to spend that much time with my dad, and I thought, hey, I get to spend a weekend with him, so I'm going to go ahead and go. So I went to Wichita, Kansas, my dad there. We got a rental car and went out in the middle of there to a little town of Lincoln, Kansas. It was a hee-haw town, you know. Population 108, salute. That's for the old people in the room who remember hee-haw. Right? And the roads out there looked pretty much like this. After a while, we lost pavement. Not sure that they have a lot of that in Kansas. And we were on dirt roads going through miles and miles of weeds. We got there pretty much what I expected. A bunch of old people. Most of them were probably about the age I am today. Who wants to spend time with them, right? And sitting at a table was all of this paper of genealogies. They were just names. Names I wasn't connected to, names that meant nothing to me. So we had a breakfast and we had a lunch, sat around and talked in between, and then we had some time in the afternoon before they had this dinner that night. Dad said, "I want to take you out and show you some stuff while we're here." So we drove out through the wheat fields like this, and he had to stop a couple of times, ask farmers for directions, and the directions were like, well, drive out till you see the oak on the left-hand side, turn right by the White's place, go out about 2 miles, take another left when you see the big rock. Like, we are never going to get home, right? But we get out there, and we end up at a place that looked like this. Big sign said, Old Bros. Dad said, before we get out of the car, I want to tell you a story. In the middle 1800s, there was a family by the name of Konopotsky who lived in the region of Poland at that time. There was a lot of religious persecution in Poland at that time, so they decided they needed to move because they were devout Lutherans. So they moved to West Prussia. When they got there, they had a daughter by the name of Christina, who they put into school. And very shortly after they got there, she met a boy by the name of Jacob. Well, this boy, Jacob, was about 10 years older than her. She was about 15 at the time. He was 25. And they fell in love. Well, you can imagine how that went over in the household with that age difference. But that love grew, and by the time she was 18, he was 28, they got married. And they started to raise a family, but West Prussia by that time had become much like Poland had been years before. Very unstable, starting to get a lot of religious persecution, and so they decided that it was time to move to the new continent. So Jacob and his brother Paul left the family in West Prussia, came over to America to find a place where they could practice their religion freely and they could raise a family. He was gone about 2 years. called back, and it didn't call, but sent back to West Prussia that it was time for the family to come over. They had had 2 children, and one of them had been born just before Jacob left for the United States. So we had a 2-year-old daughter and a newborn when he left. This daughter was now 4, the newborn was 2. And all that Christina could afford was passage in the steerage area of a freighter. There was no way she could take the kids, both kids, and make that journey across the Atlantic Ocean. So she made the gut-wrenching decision that she was going to leave her oldest daughter, a little girl by the name of Minna, behind with family. And she and their son got on a boat. When she got over here, she found that Jacob had homesteaded a farm in a little town by the name of Bross, in the middle of nowhere in the Kansas prairie. Well, shortly after she arrived, they started their family again. They had a couple of more kids, and along came a little boy by the name of Otto. Otto was a little precocious child, probably a lot like my grandson Henry. Loved to play, big laugh, enjoyed being around with other kids. He was out one day when he was 6 years old, playing with friends, playing leapfrog. He fell awkwardly, broke his neck, and died. So they had one daughter they had left behind in Europe, now lost a son. In the subsequent years, as the Bross community was growing, the railroad came through Kansas. But as happened in many cases back then, the railroad went a ways south. And suddenly there was no reason for that town Bross to be there because the new railroad stop town of Nashville was starting to grow and thrive. So nothing was left of Bross but this cemetery. The family started migrating to Nashville for all of their daily, weekly shopping duties, church, everything else. When they got to Nashville, there was a family there. And they had had several more children. In fact, by this time, Christina had had 11 children. One of those last children was a little girl by the name of Anna. And what was interesting was, about the time that Anna was born, that train that had moved the family down to Nashville brought, after 11 years, Minna to them. She had left Europe, come over when she was 15 years old, taken the train to Kansas, and she started to raise this little girl, Anna. As my dad started telling this piece of the story, some things started to come together for me. I knew this name, Anna. Well, Anna met a boy in Nashville by the name of Edward, and they fell in love. And when he told me that part of the story, it all clicked. You see, my grandmother's name was Anna. My middle name is Edward. I was named for my grandfather. And I suddenly realized that this story about people that I had never known was my story. We got out and we went into the cemetery. And he showed me the gravestone of little Otto. Born, died 6 years later. He showed me the gravestone of Jacob. He showed me the gravestone of Christina. And suddenly this little trip to the cemetery in the middle of nowhere meant a great deal to me, because it was no longer my dad's story. It was my story. This was my heritage. This was my family. The sacrifices that these people made were the ones that brought me to where I am today. And when we went back that evening to talk to these other people, I had a context I had never had before, because we now shared something really important to me. The story had always been there. I just hadn't really opened it up. But as I heard my dad tell it, as I watched the look in his eyes, as I heard the tone in his voice, I could see how much it meant to him. My father's story was my story. And we all have stories. some that we've never cared to open, some that we've heard since we were kids, and that we've carried on with us. And those stories define us. They give us a sense of meaning and context in our lives, and ultimately perhaps help us define our direction in where we're going to go in life. But the more important point is that we're all part of a bigger story. A story that our Father in heaven has left for us. A story that begins with 5 of the most important words in the history of the world. In the beginning, God created. And it's a story that ends on the other side with, and I saw a vision of a new heaven and a new earth. And the question is, in the middle, what on earth happened? Why did God create this world in the beginning that was perfect, that was designed to be the dwelling place of his people? And then we get to the other side, and he needed to create a different world, another world. But you know, many of us haven't opened up that story. It's just words on paper. It's just names that we don't necessarily have any affinity to. And so we don't feel the sense that God's story is our story. But you see, God's story is made up, first of all, of a lower story. It's the story of all these things until the end of that book that had their own lower stories. People that lived and died, did good things, did bad things, had children, lost children, moved, went to different places. The story that moved God's people from the Garden of Eden in the beginning throughout this journey and this migration that defined who his people would be over the course of time. And that lower story is really made up of this idea of sequential chronological time. Different seasons in the existence of man that move sequentially forward, that define the world that we know as reality. But what makes this story different is that it is also made up of an upper story. The narrative that weaves between all of those lower stories that says, this is why God created the world. This is what God wanted of his people. This is why we exist. And that upper story defines time differently. That God sees time from beginning to end all in one moment. And that integration into time defines all of those lower stories. Because you see, it's not just one lower story, it's a series from Adam to Noah, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to Joseph, to Moses, to Joshua, and on and on and on. And in fact, those stories are stories that are fully written in God's Word, but you see, they're only partially lived. Because God's book goes all the way through to the end of time, and we're still experiencing that chronological, sequential time. So how is it possible that the book can be fully written and only partially experienced at this point in time? David and I were home last week when the storm came and nobody could get out and we couldn't get to work. So we were flipping through the channels, and we got to Turner Classic Movies. And there was this old movie on, made in 1933, called Berkeley Square. You know that movie? Jackie, you're kind of going, yeah. Berkeley Square. It starred a man by the name of Leslie Howard. How many of you know who Leslie Howard is? Like 5, right? All right. Leslie Howard, of course, he lived in 1933, right? Leslie Howard was actually nominated for an Academy Award for this movie. Leslie Howard is the guy who played Ashley Wilkes later on in Gone with the Wind. How many of you have heard of Gone with the Wind? Few more. Those of you who haven't heard of Gone with the Wind, I can fill you in later. Right? Gone with the Wind's the greatest movie ever made. But it was this Berkeley Square starred one of the stars of Gone with the Wind. And it was a story about a guy who could travel in time, who discovered that he could travel in time. And he ends up going back several generations and meeting the woman that he loves. Now, a story that's kind of familiar, we've seen executed in different ways today, but it was fairly landmark in 1993. So at one point in the movie, he's trying to describe to his friends how this is possible, because they think he's a lunatic. And he says to them, imagine you are in a canoe, and you are rowing down a river. And on your left-hand side, you see this beautiful waterfall. At the point that you're rowing by that waterfall, it's in your present. But you keep on rowing, and you come to this beautiful open canyon where the waters are clear and they're still, and you see these vistas in front of you. Well, at the time that you get to this canyon, it's in your present. And the waterfall is in your past. But unbeknownst to you, up ahead of you, there are these rapids. And they are dangerous rapids. That is in your future. You haven't seen them yet. You don't know they're there. You only are viewing the world from your present. But imagine for a moment that there is someone standing high above this river. And they can see the entire span of that river. And what is in your present, and what was in your past, and what is in your undiscovered future is all seen by them at one time. It is all in their present. David and I looked at each other and said, who knew that Turner Classic Movies is the place to go for great theology? All right? It describes how God interacts with time. Now, you may go to Turner Classic Movies today and not be as lucky, but I'll tell you, it worked out well for us. That's how time works. And so God wrote a story fully because he can see the beginning and he can see to the end. But we are still rowing down the river. And so when we think about the journey of the Bible, it is just like that river. It begins in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth. And it winds through the story of Noah and the flood. It winds through the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It winds through Moses and Joshua, and then the prophets, all the way through to Jesus, and then to the apostles. And then gives us a glimpse of the end of time through the book of Revelation. But you see, that story is still being lived. And we stand out there toward the end in 2014, still experiencing the story, but having not seen all of it yet. So why is it important for us to interact with this book? Because it gives us context. It gives us an understanding. Many of us are much like I was with my dad. We haven't really opened the book. We don't really understand the importance of the story, and we certainly don't understand how all those lower stories feed into God's upper story and his plan for you and for me. So I think in many ways, we end up being something like the people in this video. Oh, going to have to reload. I was afraid of that. This video, I'm going to vamp for a minute, tap dance up here while he's reloading. This video is one that is actually out on the Story site. There is a website for this series that we're getting ready to go through called thestory.com. And this is a video that...
That leaves one untouched category, the Bible. Cindy, where would you like to begin?
Okay, I'll take the Bible for 200.
For 200, the answer is Genesis. Yes, Jeremy.
What is the name of the device used to create a planet in that Star Trek movie?
No, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Yes, Cindy.
What is the name of Phil Collins' band?
No, I'm sorry, that's also incorrect. No, players, remember the category is the Bible.
My buzzer's still not working.
Press firmly, Ron. Correct response. What is the first book of the Bible? Genesis, the very first book of the Bible. Throw open the cover, there it is. All right. Cindy, still your board.
Okay, I'll take the Bible for 400.
For 400, the answer is, it's one of the 10 commandments. Yes, Cindy.
What is freedom of speech?
No. That would be the Bill of Rights. Yes, Jeremy.
What is thou shalt not do anything?
Judges, can we accept that? No, I'm sorry. Can you be a bit more specific, please?
What is thou shalt not commit forgery?
No. Sorry. Ron? Well, there are 10 of them you could have picked from. No other gods, keep the Sabbath, honor your mother and father, no adultery.
I meant that one.
Yes, I'm sure you did. Cindy, still your board.
I'll take the Bible for 600.
For 600, the answer is, they're called epistles. Yes, Jeremy.
What was Jesus' crown made out of?
No. Yes, Cindy.
What is the wife of an apostle?
No, that's incorrect. You. Correct response, what is a letter from an apostle? Letter from an apostle. Cindy, still your board.
Okay, I will take...
Only 2 clues remaining, Cindy.
Okay, I'll take the Bible for 800.
For 800, the answer is, all right, listen to me very carefully. Ron, listen to me very carefully. This person took 2 of every living animal into a huge boat to survive the great flood. Cindy.
Who is Mr. Doolittle?
No. Yes, Jeremy.
Who is Dr. Doolittle?
Yes. Yes,
It
Ron.
worked. The buzzer worked.
Yes, Ron. Yes, go ahead.
Who is Joan of Arc?
No. No, it was Noah. Have you never heard of Noah? 2 by 2, the animals came. Well, that sound means it's time for our final round.
All right. So maybe a humorous view of what Bible or biblical illiteracy looks like. But the fact of the matter is, it's not that humorous when we turn it over to real life. I was able to go out to the Barna Research website. Many of you probably know that name. They do a lot of work on Christian topics. And one of their studies was on biblical illiteracy. In the study they did in 2000, they said 92% of American families own at least one copy of the Bible. That's pretty good, right? But only 37% of Americans actually read that Bible at least once a week. And maybe correspondingly, only 37% of Americans can name all 4 Gospels. In fact, in their study, more people could name the 4 Beatles than could name the 4 apostles, the 4 Gospels. 4 apostles. 12% of Christians actually do believe that Noah's wife was Joan of Arc. Can you believe that? A survey of graduating high school seniors back in 2000, so guys that are in today, you're off the hook, revealed that over 50% of those seniors thought that Sodom and Gomorrah were actually husband and wife. And a considerable number of respondents to one of the polls thought that Billy Graham was the one who taught the Sermon on the Mount. 75% of Americans believe that the Bible teaches that God helps those who help themselves, and that that is actually a biblical verse. So in 2009, they came back and they revisited their study once again. This time, it was not Americans, it was what were considered born-again Christians. Less than 1 out of every 5 people who consider themselves born-again Christians had a biblical worldview. Only half of all self-identified Christians firmly believe the Bible is totally accurate in all of its principles. They didn't ask, is it totally accurate in all of its facts? The principles. And only half. An overwhelming majority, 81%, contend that the way you get spiritual maturity is just by following the rules of the Bible. 68% heard that spiritual gifts, have heard of spiritual gifts, and that is a decline since the 2000 survey. And only a minority, roughly 1/3, can actually identify one biblical spiritual gift that they claim to possess. And these are born-again Christians. Only 34% actually believe there is such a thing as absolute moral truth. It's funny to watch a video like that. It's scary to think about the implications of living in a world where this is the knowledge we have of the Bible. We believe that it is critical in this congregation to focus on biblical knowledge. We're going to spend the next year purposefully focused on that one single thing, everything that we do. We believe there is an antidote for biblical literacy. And the first is participation in worship. We are going to start, it's called The Story, you see her over here, that is 31-week journey through that story of the Bible. And the way that you get the most out of that is show up. Show up. We want everybody to be here, to participate in this series, and to start to grow their knowledge, their commitment, their faith, their spiritual growth in this area. The second piece is we want your participation in Bible class. This is a unique series. We are going to not only have our preaching built around the story, but our preschool, our lower elementary, our upper elementary, our junior high, our high school, our college age, and our adult classes on Sunday will all be focused on exactly the same topic. If you're going to get the most out of the story, you need to be in Bible class. But most importantly, if you have children, you need to have them in Bible class with you. And that leads to the third antidote to illiteracy. And that is, we only get 45 minutes in class here on Sunday mornings. And by the way, when you compare that to the amount of time that any of us, and especially our kids, are watching TV or are surfing the internet, it is a drop in the bucket. The only way that this is going to truly resonate, it's truly going to take, is we believe there need to be parental discussions at home. Now, if you're attending your class and they're attending their classes, you have a great basis for parental discussions. What did you study today? We studied the same thing. What did you get out of that? What did that tell you about Noah? What does that tell you about God? How do we link that lower story of a man who got in a boat with a bunch of animals and lived through a flood to the fact that it is an archetype for God saving his people? That it's an archetype for the church, where he brings in both the clean and the unclean and protects them from the world and allows for them to come out on the other side in a brand new world in relationship with him. How do you share those stories with your family? If you don't today, this provides you the basis for being able to do that. And then last of all, we believe it needs to be accompanied by personal daily Bible readings. Beginning tomorrow, in the emails that Fran sends out, we're going to send you a list of scriptures that go with each week's topic of the story. And what we want to ask you to do is to very simply take 10, 15 minutes a day or in the evening and read those scriptures, so that when you come to Bible class, you're prepared for the discussion, that you can contribute, that when you come to the sermon, you have a perspective, that you can then filter what you're hearing through, and that you can then share with your children after it's over. We're also going to put the scriptures out on the website, and we will make some copies available for those of you who don't go on the website or onto email. But we believe there's something more that needs to be done at this time, in this point of where our church is. And we believe we need a greater commitment to what we're doing in the growth of our families and our children. And so we are announcing this morning that we have asked Dawn Bauer to assume the role as the Director of Child and Family Development here for this congregation. Now, we want to be very, very clear. The work that Mita is doing, and by the way, I want to stop for a minute and call out the work that Mita has done in preparing for the story. She has copied notebooks of all the materials for all of the teachers. She has gone out and ordered a ton of materials. She has absolutely been going 20 hours a day on this for a couple of weeks. And I want to thank you very, very much for all that. But Mita's not off the hook just because Dawn is going to step into this role. We still need Mita to be the coordinator for children's education and be the ministry leader. We still need LaDonna to be in charge of our children's worship. And what Dawn is going to do is stand along with and over that in a strategic as well as tactical role. Now, what does that mean? Well, we've got 5 or 6 things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time to go through, but in essence, we want her to develop a strategic approach to what we're doing and growing our kids, which means we're not just thinking from this quarter to this quarter to this quarter, but we're thinking from 2014 to 2020, what's the journey we want to take our kids on? And by the way, we live in a world that has some requirements when you bring kids together and you teach them. Some safety requirements that require policies and programs and procedures, which requires training our teachers and training people that are in this church of how to interact in a legal and effective way with them. We've asked her, because of her training and her background in this area, to take responsibility for that. We've asked her to start growing leadership at the 2nd grade and the 3rd and the 4th grade levels, so that by the time these kids get into youth programs, they are ready to step up and be peer leaders to the rest of the kids in the youth group. And we ask her to do that through community outreach programs, community involvement programs. We've asked her to coordinate and to bring together the ministry leaders so that we have a cohesive and non-siloed program. She is going to reinitiate Vacation Bible School this year, and we will introduce Vacation Bible School. Now, by the way, she's not going to teach all these classes. She's not going to prepare everything by herself. She's going to be asking you, along with Mita, along with LaDonna, to help support, because we believe there is nothing more important in the world than providing a base and a foundation for our kids to grow their faith and to believe there is a God, and He is alive, and He is active in this world, and He has a purpose for every single one of us, including them. And what we want them to see is that His story is their story. And that is the focus of this church. But there's one other piece. We have asked Jeff and Megan Murray to assume the role as co-directors of youth ministry and education. Now, once again, Josh Martin is not off the hook, Delbert's not off the hook, Andrew's not off the hook, but we asked them to play a similar role, an overview, a strategic approach, so that we're not going quarter to quarter, year to year, but in handing off what's happening with our children's ministry and moving it over to youth, that we have an approach that is seamless. That our parents know that when they put their children in the hands of the people at this church, that there is a plan. And if the parents work in conjunction with that plan, that there is a great chance that we are going to produce children of faith when they come out of high school. And not only in this congregation, but in congregations across the country, the percentage of the people who are coming out who have faith is declining. And that is not acceptable. And so we've asked Jeff and Megan to play a similar role. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through their job duties, but it is very, very similar to what we asked Dawn to do. So Dawn, Jeff and Megan will be working together. Dawn and Mita and LaDonna, Jeff and Megan, Josh, and everybody will then be coming together. The elders are going to be meeting with each of these individuals on a monthly basis for a period of time to ensure that we're putting in plans in place, that we're getting communications in place. You're going to see a TV going out in the foyer out here that's going to be dedicated to our youth programs. If you go upstairs, you're going to see a TV in the Y area up there that's going to be dedicated to our children's programs. And it's going to be refreshed content that's going to show what they're doing, where they're going, what we are trying to accomplish, and oh, by the way, what we need from each of you. Because you see, the lower story is not a series of individual family stories. It is a story of our congregations coming together to grow the faith of our children and to ensure that we pass the torch on to the next generation. Along the same lines, we have asked Matt Wolf, and we mentioned this briefly when we were doing the budget presentation, we've asked Matt Wolf to take responsibility for preaching once every 3 weeks while we are in the process of searching for a minister. Now, as was mentioned earlier, we have a minister candidate coming in on March 9th. Hey, if this turns out to be our person and that person comes in, by the way, we're not going to abandon the story. That person will come in and take up responsibility for carrying the story forward over the next several weeks. However, if that isn't the person, and oh, by the way, even if it is, there's going to be some weeks of transition in between, we've asked Matt to preach every third week, and then we have asked various men who are willing and able to step up and to preach in the interim weeks. I actually believe that model's a better model, because when we get the chance to hear the men in our congregation get up and proclaim their faith, and we have 10 or 12 of those men doing that on a consistent basis, we all grow stronger. And by the way, we all start to get better at articulating it, because we don't necessarily have someone standing up here, and thank heavens we did for 7 years, someone who's got a doctorate degree and is a great theologian. And that's important. And by the way, we're looking for someone who's knowledgeable to become our next minister. But you know what? That's not how Jesus preached the gospel. He took fishermen who had very little education, and he got them to speak up and talk about what their faith meant to them. And so we don't have to have trained people to get that message. And by the way, when our kids hear it from various people in this congregation, they start to understand. It's not just the guy who's getting paid who gets this. It's all of us. We are a community of faith. And we are going to leverage that while we're in the process of searching. So Matt will be an anchor, provide some continuity, and then our other men will fill in. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this schedule, but we've developed a schedule through Q1, Q2, and Q3, which takes us through the end of November. Right? Most of the men received a schedule last week. If you weren't here last week and I didn't hand you one, and you're pretty sure your name's on that list, come see me. And if you don't come see me, I'll come hand you one, then you'll know your name's on that list. There are resources available for all these men out on thestory.com. We're going to have some CDs for Bible classes, some materials available, and what we're going to do is share the story in a very meaningful way. In addition, we're going to outreach in a way that we haven't done for a long time. Mark Cristaldi was very helpful in helping to design a home mailer that is going to go out. We were hoping it would go this week, just due to getting things through the postal system. It's probably not going to go out until March 11th, so the first couple of weeks it won't be out there. It's going to 5,000 homes around this church, which is a huge swath of homes, by the way, 5,000 homes. And it's telling them that we're going through the story. It gives the information about our website, about our address, gives a map of how to get here, and we're going to be inviting people in. That gives us each responsibility, because it's our job to make sure those people feel welcome, and they want to come back, and they want to adopt that story as theirs. We're also going to have a banner out in the front. You see the banners that came in for inside. The one out front had to be customized. It's supposed to be here by the 6th. We're hoping it may get here a little bit earlier than that. And Greg will be coordinating getting that out there so anybody that drives by knows that we are doing this. All right? So, final thought. Life is about choices. And when we think about, are we going to open the story? Are we going to pay attention to the story? Are we going to make the story our own? It's about a choice. How are we going to spend our time? Where are our priorities going to be? What is it that's truly important to us? There was a story of a man who got caught in a flood, and as he was sitting, waiting to be rescued, he saw, sitting with him, a scorpion that was in danger of falling off the little branch that was there, being swept away into the raging torrent. So this man reached out to try to save the scorpion, and he got stung. He reached out again. He got stung again. And he kept reaching out 5, 6, 7 times, and as people were standing on the bank trying to figure out how to rescue him, they were asking him, "What are you doing? Why do you keep doing that? You know that it is the nature of a scorpion to sting you." And the old man answered back, "Just because it's the nature of the scorpion to sting me doesn't mean that I should give up my nature to try to save it. And while there is pain involved, it is my job to reach out and to try to save it." And you know, I imagine there was a point in time, maybe even right now, where in the heavenly realms, that very conversation is going on with our Father. Why do you keep reaching down to these people? They don't care. They reject everything that you're doing. Why do you keep going down there and getting pain and pain and pain when you know what the outcome's going to be? And I wonder if his response isn't, just because that's their nature doesn't mean I change mine. God keeps reaching out over and over and over in his upper story. And he looks for us as his agents in the lower story to reach out on his behalf. And so we're going to begin doing that in a very purposeful and intentional way over the next 31 weeks. Isn't that story of God's love worth reading, worth hearing, worth discussing, worth embracing? Now is the time to make God's story our story, your story. Please join us as we begin to unfold the story together next week. Let's all stand for song.